The ceremony was in full swing when a 4-year-old boy suddenly started choking on candy. As panic spread through the crowd, everyone looked helplessly, except for one royal guard who broke a 200-year-old protocol in seconds. What happened next not only saved a life, but reminded the world that behind every uniform stands a human heart ready to act when it matters most. But before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow at the same time we'll bring you another story of courage and selflessness from the Royal Guards that you won't want to miss. The morning sun cast its golden glow across Buckingham Palace as hundreds of tourists gathered for the 11:30 a.m. changing of the guard ceremony. Captain David Mitchell stood at attention near the palace gates, his bearskin cap perfectly positioned, his scarlet uniform immaculate, despite the warm June morning. At 34, Mitchell had served with distinction for 12 years, including 3 deployments in Afghanistan, where he'd earned commendations for valor under fire. But here, in the heart of London, his role was different, a living symbol of centuries-old tradition and unwavering duty. The ceremony proceeded with clockwork precision. The new guard marched from Wellington Barracks, their brass instruments gleaming as they played traditional military marches. Tourists pressed against the barriers, phones raised high, capturing every moment of the spectacle they'd traveled thousands of miles to witness. Among the crowd, the Harrison family from Manchester had secured a prime viewing spot. Sarah Harrison held her 4-year-old son Tommy close, his small hand clutching a bag of colorful sweets she'd bought to keep him entertained during the ceremony. "Look, Tommy," she whispered, pointing toward the guards. "See the soldiers in their red coats? They protect the Queen's house." Tommy's eyes widened with wonder as he watched the perfectly synchronized movements. His small fingers unwrapped another piece of candy, popping the bright yellow sweet into his mouth as the band played the British Grenadiers. The timing was flawless, the execution pristine. In just a few more minutes, the ceremony would conclude, and another successful changing of the guard would become part of history. Nothing in their training had prepared them for what was about to happen. It started so innocently. Tommy, caught up in the excitement, had unwrapped a larger, harder candy that required more chewing. As the band reached a crescendo, Tommy bit down enthusiastically, but the candy slipped backward in his small mouth, lodging firmly in his airway. At first, Sarah didn't notice. Her attention focused on recording the ceremony. It was only when she felt Tommy's small body begin to struggle beside her that she looked down. Tommy's face was rapidly changing color, his small hands clawing at his throat. The piece of candy had blocked his airway completely, and panic was setting in as his 4-year-old mind couldn't understand why he suddenly couldn't breathe. "Tommy! Tommy, what's wrong?" Sarah's voice carried alarm as she knelt beside her son, immediately recognizing the signs of distress. The little boy's eyes were wide with fear, his mouth opening and closing silently as he struggled for air. His face was beginning to take on a frightening blue tinge as oxygen became scarce. "Help! Someone help!" Sarah's voice cut through the ceremonial music like a knife. "My son is choking!" The crowd around them began to notice the commotion. A businessman nearby looked over with concern. An elderly woman gasped. Parents instinctively pulled their own children closer. "Does anyone know first aid?" Sarah screamed, her voice breaking as Tommy's struggles became more desperate. His small body was beginning to go limp as the lack of oxygen took its toll. A man in a business suit pushed through the crowd. "I know CPR," he called out, but as he reached Tommy, he quickly realized that traditional CPR wouldn't help with an obstruction. The candy was clearly lodged, and without proper intervention, the situation was becoming critical by the second. "Please, somebody help my baby!" Sarah's voice cracked with desperation as Tommy's lips grew darker blue. His small body was becoming less responsive, his struggles weaker. A woman had pulled out her phone to call emergency services. "Yes, Buckingham Palace," she was saying. "A child is choking. We need an ambulance immediately." But even the fastest response would take precious minutes that Tommy didn't have. Medical experts confirm that brain damage can occur within 4 to 6 minutes of oxygen deprivation, and death within 8 to 10 minutes. Tommy's small body was going limp in his mother's arms. His struggles had weakened significantly, and the color in his face was becoming alarming. Sarah's sobs were now audible even over the ceremonial music as she held her son, feeling utterly helpless. "He's turning blue!" someone shouted. "Where's the ambulance?" another person called frantically. It was at this moment, with Tommy's life hanging in the balance and hundreds of helpless tourists looking on, that Captain David Mitchell made a decision that would forever change both his military career and the life of one small boy. Decisive many. Captain Mitchell's battlefield medical training kicked in before his conscious mind had processed the decision to act. In Afghanistan, he'd been the medic for his unit during his second deployment, responsible for keeping fellow soldiers alive when every second mattered. The movement was swift and decisive. In one fluid motion, Captain Mitchell broke formation. His ceremonial rifle clattered to the stone pavement as he sprinted toward the crowd. A collective gasp rose from hundreds of tourists. Many had visited specifically to see the famous guards who never moved, never spoke, never acknowledged the world around them. To see one suddenly burst into action was both shocking and electrifying. "Move! Move!" Mitchell's voice carried combat authority as he forced his way through the packed crowd. Tourists stepped aside, many still filming, unsure whether they were witnessing a security or medical emergency. He reached the center where Sarah knelt holding Tommy, tears streaming down her face as the boy's body grew increasingly limp. The businessman stepped back immediately, recognizing the authority in Mitchell's voice and his obvious medical training. "Ma'am, I'm a trained combat medic," Mitchell said, his voice calm but urgent. "I need you to let me help your son." Sarah looked up at him through her tears, taking in the red tunic, the bearskin cap, the unmistakable uniform. "Please," she whispered, "please save him." Mitchell's hands moved with practiced efficiency, his muscle memory from countless emergency situations taking over. He quickly assessed Tommy's condition, the blue coloring, the weak responsiveness, the obvious airway obstruction. Every second was critical. "Tommy, can you hear me?" When there was no response, he knew the situation had progressed beyond simple back blows. The crowd had fallen completely silent, the ceremonial music creating a surreal contrast to the life and death drama unfolding. Even the other guards were straining to see what was happening. Mitchell positioned Tommy properly for infant choking relief, his large hands surprisingly gentle. He delivered 5 firm back blows between Tommy's shoulder blades, each calculated to dislodge the obstruction without causing injury. Nothing. Tommy's color was getting worse. Without hesitation, Mitchell flipped the boy over and delivered 5 chest thrusts, his fingers precisely positioned. The technique was textbook perfect, executed with the confidence of someone who had performed similar procedures under fire. Still, nothing. The candy remained lodged. Sarah's sobbing intensified. "Is he going to be okay? Please tell me he's going to be okay." Mitchell remained focused and calm, but internally he was calculating rapidly. The child had been without adequate oxygen for several minutes. Brain damage was becoming a real possibility. "I need to try something else," Mitchell said steadily. He positioned Tommy for a more advanced technique, one from military medical training for exactly these situations. The crowd watched in absolute silence as the Royal Guard worked with the precision of a trained emergency responder. His bearskin cap had shifted during his rapid movement, but he paid no attention to anything except the small life in his hands. Mitchell placed his finger carefully in Tommy's mouth, attempting a finger sweep to physically remove the lodged candy. It was delicate, too aggressive, and he could push the obstruction deeper. Too gentle, and it might not work. He felt it. The edge of the candy, slippery, but definitely there. Working with careful precision that had made him one of the most respected medics in his unit, Mitchell maneuvered his finger around the candy, trying to get a grip. The seconds felt like hours. Sarah's breathing was as labored as her son's as she watched. The crowd remained frozen, hundreds holding their collective breath. Then, with skill born of years of emergency training and determination that would not accept failure, Captain Mitchell successfully extracted the piece of candy from Tommy's throat. The small boy's first breath was a sound everyone present would remember forever. A gasping, life-affirming inhale that cut through the silence like beautiful music. Tommy's eyes fluttered open, confused and frightened, but undeniably alive. His color began returning almost immediately as oxygen flowed back into his lungs. The blue tinge faded, replaced by the healthy pink of a child who had lived to see another day.
"Tommy! Oh, Tommy!"
Sarah sobbed, reaching for her son as Mitchell carefully passed him back to her. The little boy was disoriented and upset, but he was breathing, conscious, and safe. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, washing over the palace courtyard like a wave of pure relief and gratitude. Phones captured every moment as tourists witnessed something they would talk about for years. As Tommy coughed and cried in his mother's arms, wonderful sounds after the terrifying silence, Captain Mitchell remained kneeling beside them, monitoring the boy's breathing. His medical training dictated careful observation even after successful intervention. "He needs paramedic evaluation," Mitchell told Sarah gently but firmly. "The throat can swell after an incident like this." Sarah nodded eagerly, still crying with relief. "Thank you," she whispered repeatedly. "You saved his life." Sirens approached as emergency services finally arrived. Mitchell had bought Tommy the precious minutes he needed, but professional medical evaluation remained crucial. The paramedics, finding the crisis resolved, were impressed and grateful. "Excellent work," the lead paramedic said. "Perfect technique. You saved this child's life." Lieutenant Barnes approached with concern and barely controlled frustration. "Captain Mitchell, return to your post immediately. We'll discuss this breach of protocol later." But the crowd had other ideas. "He saved that child's life!" an American tourist called out loudly. "You can't punish him for being a hero," added a British woman. "That God is a credit to your country," shouted an elderly veteran. The sentiment spread like wildfire. Tourists who had come to see stoic guards were now witnessing something far more meaningful. Proof that beneath ceremonial uniforms were real people, capable of extraordinary compassion and skill. Sarah Harrison, still holding Tommy, who was breathing normally and looking around with renewed curiosity, approached Lieutenant Barnes. "I don't know about military protocol," she began, her voice strong despite her tears, "but without this God, my son would be dead. He didn't hesitate. He saw a child in danger and acted. If that's not what a true guardian should do, I don't understand what service means." Tommy, now fully alert, looked up at Captain Mitchell with 4-year-old wonder. "Are you a soldier?" he asked. Mitchell knelt to Tommy's level, his expression softening. "Yes, I am. And my job is to protect people, especially brave little boys like you." Tommy smiled, his first genuine smile since the episode began. "You saved me!" soft Carl's response. "We saved each other," Mitchell replied gently. "You were very brave." An older gentleman stepped forward, his military bearing unmistakable. "Captain, I'm Colonel Matthews, retired. What you did today honored every person who has ever worn a uniform. Protocol serves tradition. But when life is at stake, true soldiers serve something higher." Lieutenant Barnes listened to the crowd's overwhelming support and looked around at hundreds of people from dozens of countries, all united in admiration. Social media was already buzzing. #RoyalGuardHero was beginning to trend worldwide. "Captain Mitchell," Lieutenant Barnes said finally, "return to your post. We'll debrief this properly." As Mitchell moved to comply, Sarah called out one more time. "What's your name? I need to know the name of the man who saved my son." Mitchell paused, glancing at his lieutenant, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "Captain David Mitchell, ma'am. Welsh Guards." "Captain Mitchell," Sarah repeated, memorizing the name. "Tommy will know that name for the rest of his life, and so will I." Within hours, videos of Captain Mitchell's rescue had spread across every major social media platform. News outlets worldwide picked up the story, and by evening, it was leading international broadcasts. The footage showed the dramatic moment when the stoic Royal Guard transformed into a life-saving hero. The palace's official statement, released that afternoon, read, "Buckingham Palace commends Captain David Mitchell of the Welsh Guards for his heroic actions during today's medical emergency. Captain Mitchell's intervention exemplifies the finest traditions of military service, placing the protection of life above all other considerations." Furthermore, Her Majesty herself requested a private audience with Mitchell the following morning to personally express her gratitude and present him with the Royal Victorian Medal for distinguished service. Tommy Harrison recovered completely, showing no lasting effects from the choking incident. He was, however, very interested in talking about "the soldier who saved me" to anyone who would listen. The incident sparked changes in official protocol. While maintaining essential ceremonial discipline, New guidelines acknowledged that guards could break formation in genuine life-threatening emergencies without disciplinary action. Captain Mitchell's decision had created a precedent balancing tradition with humanity. Years later, the story became a teaching moment in military academies worldwide, used to train officers in situational leadership and ethical decision-making. A small plaque was installed near the rescue site, reading, "In recognition of Captain David Mitchell, Welsh Guards, whose actions exemplified the highest traditions of military service and human compassion." Tommy Harrison, inspired by his rescue, grew up passionate about emergency medicine. The 4-year-old who nearly lost his life became a teenager volunteering with first aid organizations, carrying the lesson that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when lives were at stake. The story shows us that some things transcend all boundaries: the duty to protect life, the courage to act when others cannot, and the understanding that our greatest service happens not when we follow every rule, but when we choose to lead with our hearts. What would you have done in Captain Mitchell's position? When is it right to break protocol for human life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about the Royal Guards who stand as living symbols of both tradition and humanity. Hit the bell icon to ensure you never miss our uploads, and check out our other videos appearing on your screen right now. Remember that sometimes the greatest acts of duty come from listening to your heart and having the courage to do what's right, even when it means breaking the rules.